Okay, in this video tutorial I'm going to show you step by step how to animate the single foot character using the jumping animation poses frames that we have captured from this video. Okay, so this video we previously captured the jumping animation from the first jump and we've extracted the frames, okay, so that we can do our references. Okay, so right now let's prepare the character for animation. So let's switch over to Maya and I'm going to prepare the character first. So when you open up your character after you finished rigging it, okay, you would have placed the entire character, especially the mesh, into a separate layer. So right now I'm going to make it selectable and I'm going to rename this okay, this is optional. So right now it's already residing in its own layer, so I'm going to put it in reference mode so I don't select this. Now if I turn to wireframe mode, okay, you would see that the bones and the IK controllers are still visible. Now when we want to animate this, we do not want to animate the bones or the IK controllers. So under the viewport, okay, under the viewport menu here, show, click on show and hide the IK handles and hide the joints. Okay, so you only want to select the controllers, which are these curves, to animate the character. And right on top of the selection filters here, okay, you want to ensure that only the curves, okay, is activated. Okay, this one here. Okay, so I'm going to click on this button here and turn all objects off and then just click on the curve itself so that only the curves or the controllers are selectable. I'm going to left mouse click and drag a selection box over the controllers and place them in a new layer by clicking on this create new layer button and add the objects, and then this new layer I'm going to call it the controllers and give it a bright yellow color by clicking here. Okay, so if I deselect, you would see that the controllers are now in a bright yellow color and they are only selectable and the mesh is not. So this is the setup that you should do. Also, one more thing that you should try to do is to restrict these two controllers. This is the ball controller and then this is the toe controller. So we want to restrict it to rotate only, and we do not want it to move. Okay, so for this controller I'm going to go over to the channel box, okay, and I'm going to restrict the movement, okay, and restrict the scale and only allow rotation. So click on this controller, go and shift select the translate, right mouse click and lock it. Okay, do the same for the scale and visibility and lock it. Okay, so I'm going to do a step further. Selecting the ball rotation, I'm only going to enable it to rotate along this axis, and in this case it is my X axis. So select both the rotate Y and Z, right mouse click and lock it. So depending on how you create your character, it might be a different axis. So for the toe controller I'm going to do the same. I'm going to restrict the translate X, rotate X, Y, Z, scale X, Y, Z, and visibility. I'm going to select all these values. I'm going to lock them. So right now my controllers cannot be moved. Okay, they can only rotate in the X-axis, and I cannot rotate it in other axes. Okay, so I'm ready to do my animation. So first I'm going to arrange my desktop in such a way so that I can see the jump reference, okay, which I've prepared in this folder. So I'm using the Windows image viewer so that I can scrub forward and backwards to navigate between the frames. Okay. So to make it easier for me, I'm going to start my animation at frame 50. So right now, currently, this is pose 1, frame 50. So I'm going to start my beginning of the timeline at frame 50. So I'm going to go to this box here. The first box, I'm going to type 50. In the second box here, I'm temporarily for now, I'm going to enter 115. Okay, this box as well, 115. So now I restrict my timeline to show 50 to 115. Okay, it'll be a good idea to position your character in a side view like this. Okay, rather than going to the left view where you can't see the foot controller. So if you go to the perspective view, you can at least still select the foot controller. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to set keys for all the main frames. Okay, so what we are setting here are keyframes for all the controllers. Okay, so let me try to explain the difference. Now if I only left mouse click and select the main controller, and when I press S, I'm going to set key only for this particular object. So if I click on another controller like the foot controller here, you will notice that there is no keyframe set. Okay, how can you tell? I click on the main controller, you can see a red line here. Okay, that signifies a keyframe. And over here on the channel box, it shows everything is red. That means this controller is animated. Okay, there's a keyframe there. Okay, but if I were to choose another controller, I'm at frame 50, there is nothing there. So for setting key poses, it is best to select all the controllers and set keyframes at the same time. So right now, all the controllers will contain a keyframe. Okay. So now, at frame 50, we are going to focus on the reference here. Okay, the hip is going to represent our character's head, and then naturally the legs are going to represent the rest of our character. Okay, so we're going to focus our attention on his hip all the way to the foot. Okay, so now we know at 50 there's a pose 1. So let's move on to the next pose. Okay, the next pose is frame 62. So I'm going to scrub the timeline to frame 62, select all the controllers, and then press S again to set a master keyframe. Okay, moving on. Frame 75. Okay, I'm going to select all the controllers and press S again to set a keyframe. Okay, moving on here, frame 82. I'm going to scrub the timeline to frame 82. All my controllers are still selected. Well, actually, the top one is not. Okay, I'm going back to 75. Okay, just want to make sure that all the controllers have a keyframe selected. Okay, so there is a keyframe there. So going to frame 82, I'm going to left mouse click and select all the controllers again, and then I'm going to press S. Okay, so now the next frame is frame 84. Okay, frame 84. Okay, this is where the character lifts off from the ground, and I'm going to press S to set a keyframe. Okay, so now here's an interesting part of the animation. Okay, from frame 50 to 84, he is essentially still on the same spot. So if you are going to animate the main controller, you do not move the main controller at all, because from frame 50 all the way to frame 84, the character is still staying at one spot. However, from frame 84 onwards, he flies through the air, and then he lands at frame 96. So for now, just ignoring these two keyframes, we are going to animate the main controller to move forward and land at frame 96. So straight away we go to frame 96, select the main control only, select only the main controller. Okay, do not select everything, select only the main controller. Okay, and then just move forward. In this case, I need to move forward in the Z-axis. Okay, move forward in the Z-axis, and you estimate where he's going to land. And make sure your auto key is on. Okay, this button here must be red and highlighted so that when you move in the z-axis, it will automatically generate a keyframe for you. And once you have moved to the location that you like, select all the curves, the controllers, and press S again to set keys to all these controllers. Okay, then we have the first movement animation. Okay, and then now we're just going to proceed on by the other 2 frames. We'll come back to the other 2 frames when it's in the air. Okay, the next frame is 97, so it's just 1 frame difference with all the controllers selected. Press S again. Okay, and then the next keyframe, I think is the last one, is frame 104. So go to frame 104 and then press S again. Okay, so let's go and look for the 2 frames where he is mid-air. So this frame, which is frame 89. Okay, frame 89, he should be in mid-air. All the controllers selected, press S. And then at frame 94. Okay, 94 is where it's still in the air, and then I'm going to press S. So once you have done all these steps, you would have set keys for all the main poses. Okay, the next part will be quite simple. That is to refer to the image and try to pose it as closely as possible. All the poses that you've seen in the reference. So let's concentrate on the first few poses. Okay, now the very first pose, we don't do anything because he's standing straight and still. But the second pose, okay, now to navigate between the poses, you can grab any of the controllers and then you use these 2 buttons here, alright, to navigate between the poses. Okay, so 50, there's nothing, so we're going to leave 50 as it is. Okay, another shortcut key you can use is the comma or the full stop key, okay, on your keyboard to navigate between the keyframes. Okay, so 50, there's nothing, we're going to leave it as that. I'm going to press 6 to show it in shaded mode. Okay, and then at frame 62, let's take a look at the reference here. His hip moves forward and lowers down a bit. So in order to move the hip, we need to grab the hip neck controller. So at frame 62, he moves forward and then he bends down a bit. So now we got our animation done. Please make sure that your auto key is on so that it will capture your new keyframes. Okay, now let's move on to the next keyframe, frame 75. Now at frame 75, he has moved, squatted down at the lowest possible distance. So again, with the hip neck controller selected, we just move it down until it squat down. Okay, possibly move forward a little bit. And possibly the ball controller, we're going to rotate it up slightly like this. Okay, and if you want, you can actually rotate this forward a little bit just to match the angle of his head. Okay, moving on to the next keyframe. Okay, this is frame 82. So using the navigator, okay, keyframe navigator button here, and move on to frame 82. So now we need to pose this character to match this pose, especially the hip and the foot. Okay, so grabbing the hip neck controller, I'm going to push it forward much more. Okay, and the ball, if you look closely here, the foot right now is bent in this angle like that. So we need to select the ball controller and rotate it until it bends, until it looks similar to the angle you see. And the hip neck controller going to push forward, okay, and then possibly lift upwards like that, and maybe up high a little bit like this. Okay, so this pose, I'm happy with this. So let's move on to the next key pose, and this will be pose number 5. This one here, you can see tiptoe. Okay, it's tiptoe, and then we're going to use our toe controller and rotate it until it matches this pose. His hip is way forward, so first I'm going to grab the hip neck controller and push it way forward. Okay, so if you notice something like this, it just means that your knee controller needs to be forward. Okay, now grab the toe controller, Okay, rotate it until it matches the angle, okay, of the reference. The hip neck controller can still go up higher and more forward until it matches roughly the angle of the jump. Okay, so I'm happy with this pose. And now he's going to go airborne in the next pose, which is at frame 89. So using my shortcut key in Maya, I'm going to select one of the controllers, frame 89. So we need to lift him up. This will be the maximum height of the jump. Select the foot controller and shift select the neck hip controller and move the character up. Okay, and you want to move the hip neck controller forward slightly, then select the foot controller. Okay, notice the foot in the reference. Okay, the back of the foot is pointing this direction, so we need to select the foot controller and rotate it until the back faces, okay, the direction like this. So you need to shift it back a little bit and push it back until the pose matches the reference. Okay, the knee is sort of pointing down slightly, okay, like this, and the head possibly rotate down a little bit. Okay, so my pose is done. Then moving on to the next pose, frame 894. So I'm going to select one of the controllers, move on to frame 94. At this point he's still airborne, so select both the hip and the neck controller, shift select, and then move it up slightly. Okay, I'm going to move the hip back a little bit. First lower it first and then moving it back until I match this L shape pose. Okay, maybe slightly up a little bit. Okay, I'm happy with this. Then moving on to the next pose, frame 96. So going back to Maya, going to frame 96. Okay, this is where his feet touches the ground. So in this case, right, since we got one foot, we're going to select the foot controller and rotate it back like that, so the foot looks like it's digging to the ground. Then select the hip neck controller, lower it down and push it back. Okay, so this looks like the pose where his foot is about to, the rest of his body is going to land on the ground. Then moving on to the next pose, the foot is flattened to the ground, which is frame 97. So the foot is now flat on the ground. I'm just going to move this back and then push this forward slightly. And finally, the last pose, he would have squatted at the lowest possible distance. So at frame 104, I'm going to lower it down. Okay, and possibly grab the ball of the foot and rotate it upwards a bit. Okay, so just to animate him standing up slightly, I'm going to push forward to maybe around 112. And I'm going to select all the keyframes, or select all the controllers and press S to set a keyframe. And in order to get back to the neutral pose, and if you have rigged up your character properly, you just need to zero out the values. Yeah, especially for the foot and the ball rotation, I'm going to zero it out so that he would stand up nicely. So because my auto key is on, okay, it will override the keys. So now let's review our animation. Just scrub the timeline back and forth, and then you would have seen that the character would have performed the jump nicely. Okay, what is left right now is to adjust the acceleration and deceleration of the jump. Now if you notice carefully, the main controller actually gradually picks up speed before it slows down. Okay, so we're going to the curve editor. So we're going to go to Windows, Animation Editors, click on the Graph Editor, and I'm just going to select the main controller first and I'm going to adjust the translate Z speed in the translate Z channel. Pressing F will zoom and fill the view. Okay, and in this case you can see, if I zoom in, select one of the keys, you can see that the speed is gradually picking up. Okay, so I want the speed to be constant, so because I applied keys to all the controllers, there are two keys here which I don't need. I can actually delete them. Okay, let me undo that. Select this key and then delete them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this key, then I'm going to click on this button here to break the tangents, grabbing the handle here, pressing W to move, and then middle mouse click and drag it so that it is a straight line. So for the other side, the other keyframe, I'm going to do the same thing, break the tangents, grab the handle by dragging a box over it, middle mouse click and drag it down until you get a faster acceleration of the jump. Okay, so next I also want to do the same thing to the foot controller. Now for the foot controller, the speed that we want to adjust is how fast it lifts up, especially here, okay, where the foot controller lifts up. So the direction that we want to change is both the Z and the Y axis. So go to translate Z first. Okay, and we're going to select this hand. In fact, let me just focus on select these three keys and then just press F. Okay, so select this key, break the handle, and then I'm going to straighten it. Select this key here, break the tangent, and then select the handle and move the handle until it looks like this. Okay, so that is for the Z. Now for the Y axis, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, let me just focus my attention on these keys. Okay, I do not need this key. Okay, I'm going to select this key, break the tangents, grab the handle, and so that the foot will lift up much higher. Same for this. I'm going to break the handle, break the tangents, so that it will come down more abruptly. Okay, so I fixed the foot acceleration now and it looks much better, the speed. Okay, although at one frame I would need to definitely make him a little bit higher so that it will not scrunch up like this. So I'm going to grab this, and or perhaps I'll come and fix this later. Right now, if you see him crushed up like that. Okay, there's one more area which I need to adjust, which is the translation Z and Y axis of the hip neck controller. So let's go to translate Z and see how it looks like. Okay, so we want the pickup to be fast, so it actually starts from here, from this keyframe. So let's go to this keyframe. In fact, let's focus on this area where he jumps up and lands. So starting from this keyframe, break the handle. We're just gonna make it go faster. Okay, and then for the Y axis, same thing, break the handle and then just make him move much faster. Okay, so we have an issue here. Okay, perhaps we need to add another keyframe to prevent this from happening, or we can try to move the knee controller further, okay, so that it doesn't crush up like that. Okay, whenever you see the mesh doing something weird like this, you will have to go and add a few more keyframes to prevent this from happening. So what I'm going to do is at frame 91, okay, so I'm going to grab the controller here, the hip neck controller. I'm just going to pull him up slightly, and then maybe at frame 94 just pull him up some more. okay, so that he doesn't get crushed up that much. Okay, so I fixed the acceleration and deceleration of the jump. Okay, and I also added the extra keyframe so that he will jump up later on. Okay, so that is how you do the jump. Okay, using reference frames from a video. Okay, so for your assignment, this is only your first jump. You are required to do an additional jump, and you need to model an obstacle to jump over that. So using the keyframes and the reference frames that you have from your jump poses, you can figure out how many frames between each of these actions, and then you can just keyframe it accordingly. Okay, so I hope this video is useful, and you'll be able to replicate this assignment from this video.